Hello guys, so I am still without my camera, new studio and everything. This video is being done on my webcam and it's for one of my subscribers, Nikos. He has asked me a question about the NAD T778 and I've had a look into it, and basically, is it worth the money? Let's have a look. So the NAD T778, so what is it? It's a small AV receiver, and it's based on the Hypex, the Hypex Class D modules, which is kind of where a lot of these big brands they're going into these days. It's a little bit unusual for an AV receiver in that it has a big touch screen at the front, and it's not so bulky, it's not so big. And yeah, let's discover why that is. Let's have a look into it and see if I think it is a good buy or or if it is not a good buy. Sorry for the broken English there. So let's start with the things I like about the NAD T778. First of all, the design. Obviously, it's very nice, very pretty, lovely size. And that depends on you. Some people just like the gear to look like real gear, big, bulky, big transformers and all that. The NAD is not going to appeal to those sorts of people. But if you like it neat and tidy in your living room, for example, then that is a really good choice with the NAD actually for that. Probably the best that I've seen. The next thing I like about it is the touchscreen display. While I don't think you're going to use it, I think it's a bit pointless. I do like it. It's nice to have a capacitive touchscreen, just for the show off. If you want to show off, look, I think it's good in that sense, very unique. But I would be using a remote control, or I'd be using my phone to control the receiver via an app. The next thing I like about the NAD T778 is the Hypex based Class D amplification. Typically, that provides you a very clean sound that will reveal more from your speakers, and it generally shows your speakers for what they are. So they don't really color the sound, which is maybe what you really want for movies, to be honest with you. I find that when I'm listening to music, it's nice to have a colorless sound when you're listening to music, but sometimes you just want to chill out, and sometimes you want the sound to be a little bit, have a bit of warmth to it or a bit of extra dynamics. And, there's two camps with this. But when it comes to movies, I just want the audio, like human speech, to sound like human speech, because that's what I'm going to be focusing on, the movie. And yeah, I want it to be pretty clean and clinical. And I think that the Hypex amplifiers are really good for that. I mean, as you can see behind me, you might see I've got one right there. Let's see if you can see that actually. Yeah, that black one here, look. That one there. That one is the Hypex NC252 nCore. And I use that for stereo. So I know that contradicts what I said earlier, but I still think it's a good amp for stereo too. That's why I've got two amps. I've got an arc amp, and that gives me that kind of, warm, kind of more like magical kind of sound, but not too extreme, not like a Marantz sort of thing. It's more like a kind of laid back, not too laid back. Then the Hypex gives me that, it's that amplifier that reveals what the speaker is really capable of. So yeah, that's what I think about that. The next thing I like about it, it has Dirac, live, okay, which is a EQ. It's like a parametric EQ, like smart EQ. It's becoming very popular these days. You used to hear of like Audeze, and there's one by Anthem called Anthem Room Correction, ARC. And I think for a while that was always the best, but like Dirac live EQ, I've noticed in the last couple of years, 2-3 years, it's really like you've seen them on all of these receivers now, or even stereo amplifiers. So that's what I think about that. It's good. I think it's going to be good for home cinema. It's a good addition. The next thing is Blue OS streaming. And I think, yeah, again, from what I've heard, it's one of the best in the business. It's solid, it's stable, it supports many platforms as well. And yeah, you'll be able to stream in lossless quality, which is what you want, isn't it? From a hi-fi, audiophile product. The next thing I like about this T778 is, even though it's quite a small amplifier, we have 9 channels. So that means we have space on board for Dolby Atmos. You can have your front heights, you can have your rear height speakers, and then you can have a 5.1 system that goes with that. So it's 5.1.4 is what they call that. So that's what your 9 channels are for. And yeah, but what's not to like about that? Again, another thing I like about it is it has pre-outs. It has all the pre-outs on the back. So if you wanted to, I suppose you could use this unit as an AV processor. If you want to, let's say, if you want the NAD to do the processing, and then you can send that out to an external amplifier. Let's say one day you want to upgrade the power amplifier, make it even better. You could use the NAD for that, I believe, unless there's a weird restriction in the menu that doesn't allow you to do that. I would have thought that that's what the pre-outs would be for. So that's, I think, is a plus considering the size. Another thing is it has dual subwoofer outputs, something that I always like to see in a receiver. I don't like when, you have 0.1, so you have one subwoofer output and then you got to use a splitter, and I hate that sort of stuff. Dual subwoofer outputs is fine. Now, I think a real killer feature, and I should have really started with this because I think this is the killer feature about the NAD T778, and that's the modular design construction, the MDC, as you might see it on their spec sheet. The modular design construction concept is a new approach. It's NAD's way of basically giving you the power in the future to upgrade the receiver that you have. So when new features come out, let's say they make a new Dolby Atmos UXYZ HD. Yeah, let's say if it improves in the future or whatever, or there's a new version of HDMI or something like that, then this modular design construction allows you to upgrade certain parts of the amplifier. As time goes on, the amplifier won't fall victim to being phased out. So it's future-proof. That's the concept here. I really like that. I've been saying that for a long time. I hate how these amplifiers, you spend $3,000, $4,000 on an amplifier, especially the ones from Anthem, by the way. I've done that before. I think I bought an MRX 710, I believe. If I remember, it was a 710. Next minute, Dolby Atmos. Oh yeah, no Dolby Atmos. Next minute, I think it couldn't support 4K HDR. I think it couldn't do that. It's a few years back now, so I can't remember. But there's certain things it couldn't support. Then the new one came out, and yeah, we can support it now. So that really, really annoys me, especially when you spend thousands on stuff. So good, it's good. Modular design construction, I give it a thumbs up. The other thing that makes it really good is that it's energy efficient because of the Class D amplification. So it's going to run cool. I believe they're like 85, 90% efficient, the Class Ds. So it's going to run cool. It's going to use less power. And it's always a good thing. As long as performance isn't degraded, then that's economics, isn't it? That's economical. So that's good. And according to the measurements, the last thing I like about it is according to the measurements that I have seen online regarding the DAC, right, the digital to analog converter, it seems like the DAC is okay. It's not going to be as good. It's limited by the fact that it's inside an AV receiver enclosure, where today pretty much any AV receiver is limited by this problem, where we have noise and we have distortion created because of of the design, and it can be overcome, but for some reason these AV receiver manufacturers, they don't overcome it. So what we have is a DAC that's good for an AV receiver, still not going to be as good as if you had a stereo dedicated setup, like a separate DAC, a separate power amp, separate, you know, all that sort of separates, you know. If you had that, it would be a better performance. So yeah, and I found this information. There's a site called Audio Science Review. Probably a lot of you have heard it. It's one of my go-to sites when it comes to when I'm really looking at what is in this thing, how does it perform on paper. Of course, there's the element of listening to it, which is never addressed really on Audio Science Review. I mean, the guy says that he does listen to it, but my opinion is if you've measured it, you've seen the results, and then you listen to it, then there could be an element of like confirmation bias. So if it looks on paper like it doesn't perform well, well then you're already going into that test, you're compromised. You can't say it's a fair test. A real test should really be double blind. That's the scientific method. That's why we have it. So yeah, but otherwise, I mean, I do like the site. I'm not anyone who supports Amir. I've got no problem with the guy. I like his stuff. I use his stuff all the time. I'm just saying that there's two parts to this thing. There's the objective, there's the subjective, but the subjective side has to be done. It can't just be done with ease. Do you know what I mean? You have to plan how you're going to do it, if you get what I'm trying to say. So that's that. How long have we got in? 11 minutes. I'm overdoing it. The things I don't like about the NAD T778. Right. Here's the first thing, and I think it's a bit cruel, this one. The Dirac Live EQ that I mentioned earlier, it's only partial. Can you believe it? It's 20 Hertz up to 500 Hertz only. So it's covering your sub bass, your bass, and it's covering you up to about 500 Hertz, which is in the mid range. And that's it. Anything above 500 Hertz, you don't get any Dirac. Okay, and if you do want to unlock that, you have to pay to unlock it. You have to upgrade to the full edition, and I think that really takes away from how powerful Dirac could be. I think it takes away how powerful it could be, because that's what it is. It's one of the best EQs out there, one of the best parametric EQs out there. I personally, I heard it a couple times in the past. It is good. It's better than others, but still, I always use my ears to EQ some frequencies. I don't just use the mic. The mic never understands how you hear. The mic captures everything in the room, okay? And your brain interprets frequencies in the room differently to the mic. But having said that, you should still give people the full Dirac. You know, it's £2,500, this receiver. What is it? A bit of software that you now have to pay to unlock? I don't like that. Okay, I think a lot of people won't like that. So, yeah. The most important part to correct, though, is that range, 20 Hertz to 500 Hertz. There's a thing called room transition frequency. When you get after that room transition frequency, can't talk, then it becomes less important to EQ anyway. Because, yeah, basically below that point, it's the room modes that you're correcting. That's the most important part. Okay, so yeah, you could interpret that two ways, but I don't like how you have to pay to upgrade it. The next thing I don't like, no IMAX enhanced support. So other amplifiers have that on board. Why not the NAD? For example, I believe the Anthem range of amplifiers, which also sound very good, which also cater to audiophiles, they do support IMAX enhanced, I believe. So it depends if you care about that. The other thing I think I don't like about the NAD T778 is it only has 5 HDMI ports. So that's me out. Count me out. I can't buy it because my receiver downstairs, my Yamaha Aventage 3000 series, is already plugged in with 6 HDMIs. So I wouldn't be able to buy this NAD. And I always add new things to that receiver downstairs. At the moment, the latest thing I added to it was a home theater PC, one of those little Intel NUC, the NUC NUC PCs. And yeah, you know, I had 4, 5, and then 6, maybe 7 one day, who knows. So I think 5 is a bit limited for an AV receiver. For some people it might not, so that really depends on you. There's also, regarding the HDMIs, the outputs, so the ports that send out to your TV, projector, whatever, only one of those HDMIs supports 4K, full 4K in HDR, 60 frames a second. The other HDMI port is 1.4, so you're not going to get the same output from both HDMIs. If you had a TV setup like I did up until a year or two ago, I had a TV and then I had a projector screen that came down, right? You wouldn't be able to have HDMI to the TV in HDR, full HDR, 4K, 60 frame, and the projector at the same time. You wouldn't be able to do it. So again, another reason why I wouldn't have been able to buy it with my setup I had just a couple years back. Right, the next thing I don't like about it, number 5, and I think this is a big one, but it could be addressed, and that it doesn't support HDMI 2.1, which is the new HDMI standard. I think manufacturers, they have had time to adapt to this now. Everything should really come with HDMI 2.1. No 4K 120 Hertz support. So if you have an Xbox, the new PS5, that's one of the main features of those consoles. Your amplifier, your new NAD amplifier, will not support that, which is not good, is it? Yeah, but it could be addressed with the modular design construction that I mentioned earlier. Let's see, but from as far as what I've read, that I haven't seen anything that confirms that that is going to be something that will be supported. The next thing I don't like about the NAD T778 is the Hypex chipset that it uses, the Class D. It's the older UcD chipset, I believe, and it's not the new nCore chipset, the one that I showed you over there. And that nCore unit has changed the game in Class D amplification. It really has. There's a lot of people switching to nCore units now. So again, we've got old tech in there. I just said it doesn't have HDMI 2.1. Now it has the UcD Hypex. Why don't you put the full thing in? Because maybe it costs more, I think. Now, why is it a problem? Well, again, from the measurements that I've seen on Audio Science Review, the guy reckons that it distorts early. So apparently there's a rise in distortion at only 5 watts. 5 watts, okay? This is meant to be 85 watts per channel, fully driven. So yeah, at 5 watts, if it's starting to distort, then I wouldn't say it's a reference amplifier, but that's what you feel when you buy the product. So yeah, that's what I don't like about it. The next thing is the 85 watts per channel, fully driven. So they say, yeah, it's fully driven, all the channels 85 watts, fine. But one, for a receiver, that's not really that much, okay, RMS. Because what we have to consider, this is how they trick people, is that you can say, oh, it's RMS, it's 100 watts, right? But then when you look at the dynamic power of the receiver, of the channel, so 100 watts, the dynamic power might only be 150 watts. So it's got 100 watts and then 50 watts in reserve. Now, if you think about headroom, all right, so if the audio is, let's say, here, if you want headroom, okay, so when there's like a loud section in a movie or then quiet and whatever, but the headroom, you're going to need, let's say, 10, 15, 20 decibels above that. And the power requirement is exponential, right? It's a big difference. So I think for every 3 decibels increase you want, it's double the wattage requirement. So if you have 85 watt per channel and the dynamic headroom is like, I think I read it was 160 watts. So you're allowing double. So you're allowing a 3 dB headroom then. Is that really good for movies? 3 decibels of headroom or whatever it is. I don't know the exact calculation. I guess you guys can look it up. But I'm telling you, have a look at other receivers, have a look at other power amplifiers with huge transformers, okay? And have a look at what headroom they've got. There's a company called Axiom Audio, okay? Have a look it up. Axiom Audio, and they have, let's say RMS is 100, and then the dynamic headroom will be 3 times the RMS. So not double, not 50% extra. I've seen some 20, 30% extra. Axiom will give you 3 times the dynamic headroom. So what that means is you can turn the amplifier up and it won't distort. It will sound, you won't really feel it like it's loud, because things start sounding loud when you get distortion. You can turn something up really loud. If there's no distortion, your brain won't really see it as loud as what it really is if you had a decibel meter. And you want that for movies, don't you? In large spaces especially. So that's another thing. Is it really a true AV receiver? Well, yeah, it is, but that's the reason why a separate component really makes sense to give you that headroom. And yeah, another thing I don't like about it is, again, go to Audio Science Review. The measurements, when you look at the product, you get really high hopes. This is going to be a great product. When you see the measurements, you realize it's an average product. And there's some other receivers out there that are already outperforming it when it comes to noise and distortion. I believe the Anthem ones might perform better, according to the measurements, okay? Not to the ears, all right? So that's for you to test that in your room. But yeah, and finally the DAC performance. While I said earlier on it was pretty good DAC performance, the performance according to ASR, Audio Science Review, is barely over 16-bit. So bear in mind that your surround sound, lossless, is all 24-bit audio. So you've got a bottleneck there. Anyway, my advice to Nikos based on this is, Nikos has a Sony AV receiver and it doesn't have pre-outs, I believe he told me. Well, maybe another option is buy a receiver with good processing and a decent DAC inside, like a Yamaha, for example. I always recommend Yamaha. You know, again, they don't always measure the best, but they're stable. You know, you can have it for years and it always works. I never had a Yamaha that broke down. Every time I use the menu, I know exactly where I'm going. They get updates frequently. There's that element to consider. So you could get an AV receiver and then plan an upgrade in the future to a proper external amplifier if you want proper sound, like the one I mentioned earlier with Axiom Audio. That's something that you could do as an alternative. Yeah, you can get an Atmos receiver, blah, 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 blah. Another one you could do is you could get a dedicated AV processor and it doesn't have any amplification inside. So they're expensive. The cheapest one I found that's half decent is the Motiva MC700. And that's £949, but the thing, it can't do anything. It's got no HDMI 2.1, it's got no Dolby Atmos, it's 7.1 only, so it's hardly future-proof. If you want something future-proof, you have to spend $3 grand, $4 grand. So yeah, they're really expensive. Another alternative, if you want an all-in-one, is the MRX by Anthem, the MRX 740, and it's newly released, the MRX 1140 if you want to go extra. Bit over budget, but that's the option. I said earlier, I have experience with Anthem receivers. They've got a clean sound, not always my cup of tea, but it's got a clean, like, transparent sound. However, they're buggy. I don't know if they've sorted this out, but they're buggy. A lot of people I've read online say they're buggy in the forums as well. I've had the exact same problems. You know, you just get hangs and the thing shuts down, restarts. You know, I did the arc calibration. 3-4 times I ran the arc calibration. Same positions with the mics. Everything. Okay? Yeah, I got 3-4 different results. So how accurate can it really be? If I'm redoing the same test, I've not changed any other variable, and the results come out different each time, then according to the scientific method, then that's not really applicable, is it? As something that is valid in an experiment. You know, one of the tests is if you repeat the test in the scientific method, then you should get the same result back. It doesn't, from my experience. Okay, I can just hear the keyboard warriors on the click clacking. Okay, yeah. Now, if you really want a stereo sound, Nikos, if you really want a stereo sound, like good stereo sound, just get a stereo amplifier and get a stereo DAC, and that's it. Be done with, and you know. You get that for a lot less. And then just leave your AVR, just get any AVR, keep your Sony, just leave that for AVR duty. You know, I've had to do that. This here is going to be my new listening room. This is where I'm going to listen to stereo. Downstairs, I'm just going to leave that for light stereo and movies, because you can't have it all in one unless you buy a separate pair of speakers and put it on the other side, you know. Add a pair of speakers downstairs. Well, now you've got 11 speakers downstairs, you know, with a separate amp, and it gets confusing, you know. So, yeah, I recommend Yamaha. I've always had good experience with them. I know last year there was some issue with the HDMI 2.1 because it's newly released and it doesn't work completely right. But it's a brand new. It's a brand new format, isn't it? HDMI 2.1. It's a brand new technology. There's going to be teething issues. Yamaha have just released a new version of this amplifier recently, and apparently it might be on the route to being fixed, this issue. So yeah, it's not just that one receiver has had this problem. So yeah, and the final recommendation is look for ways that you could improve your room. If you're not happy with the sound that you've got from the Sony receiver that you've got now, I think you said it's not so musical and stuff. Well, look, behind me I've got these poison bass traps. I don't know if you guys see my last video, but these things stink. Right, I'm trying to air them out. But they do improve the sound. If you can get some sort of acoustic treatment in your room, and you place acoustic treatment in key places, you could improve the stereo image. You could reduce your RT60 times, your echo decay times, your reverb decay. That's going to improve your sound more than the receiver. More than the receiver. So if you really want to improve your stereo sound, start with that. Find like some nice decorative acoustic panels. You could even make them and see if you can do it that way first. Don't just think it's always the components of your system that's always the problem. It's not always that. Sometimes it's just your room. Sometimes it is just that, and in a lot of cases it is that. And that's why people don't do music production in rooms like this. They do it in dedicated studios where they spent thousands on the treatment. So yeah, that's my phone's going off now, so I have to go. But hopefully this helped you, Nikos, and anybody else in the audience watching. I do sometimes do responses to people via video like this, because yeah, that's how I like to help people. I don't always like to help people with comments. Of course I do respond to all my comments as much as I can. So yeah, hope you like the video. I'm going to eat my dinner now. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next time.